President Biden is condemning Republican efforts to restrict voting access, calling it the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. More than a dozen states have tightened their voting laws since the 2020 election, according to one analysis. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House. Ed, there was also one key issue that the president did not mention in his speech.
That's right, Adriana. Good morning. So far, he has not joined the calls to end the filibuster, that Senate procedural tactic that can limit debate. Many Democrats believe that's what's holding up attempts to pass voting rights legislation without Republican support. But even if the president suddenly endorsed ending the filibuster, he'd have to convince moderate members of his own party to do the same.
The 21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. And we're going to challenge it vigorously.
Speaking from Philadelphia, the birthplace of American democracy, President Biden forcefully attacked voting restrictions being enacted in more than a dozen GOP-controlled states.
Stand up for God's sake and help prevent this concerted effort to undermine our election and the sacred right to vote. Have you no shame?
The White House hopes the president's speech will jumpstart a push for new federal voting rights legislation. But the bills he wants passed can't clear the closely divided Senate unless it abolishes the filibuster. The president also directly addressed unfounded accusations embraced by former President Trump that Democrats stole last year's presidential election.
The big lie is just that, a big lie.
The speech came as more than 50 Democratic state lawmakers left Texas in order to stop debate on GOP elections law changes.
The motion fails for lack of quorum.
They spent their first full day in Washington pushing the Senate to pass voting rights legislation.
We're just hoping to move the needle a little bit more. We're hoping that Congress would understand the urgency.
This is about Americans.
The group met with Vice President Harris and supportive Senate Democrats.
What's happening in Texas by the GOP legislators and governor is just outrageous.
But Republicans continue to dismiss their D.C. trip as a political stunt.
It's disingenuous and downright false to claim that any effort to prevent fraud is a veiled attempt at voter suppression.
And while Texas's governor threatened to arrest the Democrats, they said they're not concerned.
We would not go to jail.
So the Republican-controlled Texas House has ordered Texas law enforcement to round up those Democrats, but the Texas Rangers have no jurisdiction outside the Lone Star State. If, however, the Democrats were to return to Texas during the special session, they could indeed be rounded up, brought to the state capitol in Austin, and made to stay there until official business is completed, Adriana.
Wow, Ed. You know, another one of the president's legislative priorities, of course, is infrastructure. There was news overnight that Democratic senators have reached a deal on a $3.5 trillion plan that they say they'll try to pass without Republican support. How can they do that?
Exactly. Well, we're diving into the Senate toolbox this morning and all the various procedural rules they have. There's one called reconciliation, which allows them to pass a budget bill with a simple majority, all 50 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus plus the vice president. In order to do that, or they're going to do that now by passing this bill, and it includes a handful of Democratic priorities, among other things. Payment for child care, more funding for child care, expanding Medicare, and addressing climate change. It's unlikely that any Republican is going to support this plan, but it includes a way to pay for the $3.5 trillion price tag. That is why President Biden is headed to the Capitol today to convince those Democrats to sign on. Anthony, you could say we're entering the arm-twisting phase of the Biden presidency.
All right, Ed, thank you very much.